Welcome, everyone. My name is Jess Posner. My pronouns are she and they, and I am the director of the Virtual Y at the YMCA of Central New York. I am a white woman in her mid-30s with brown hair, glasses, and I am wearing a black turtleneck. The background behind me is a We Wear Black graphic, which is an invitation from the African American Resource Network to join the Y tomorrow, February 25th, 2022, by wearing black in unity with those who are working daily to fight injustice, prejudice, and inequity. We do hope that you will join us tomorrow by wearing black and are honored to celebrate Black History Month with our We Wear Black kickoff event tonight. For more information about all of our Black History Month programming, please visit ymcacny.org/BHM2020, which I will paste in the chat after our introduction. It is a great honor to welcome you all tonight to our very special event, a special reading and conversation with Michele Jones Galvin, Descendent Biographer of Harriet Tubman. Ms. Jones Galvin will be joined by our very own Darnell Hayes for a meaningful conversation following her reading. Before I introduce our guests, I'd first like to orient us to our virtual platform, Zoom. I'd like to ask you to please keep your audio muted for the entire program unless you are invited to unmute. If you would like to communicate with me or one of the other guests tonight or ask questions of our speakers, please use the chat function, which you can access on the bottom of your screen if you are joining in on a computer, or in the three dots if you are joining via mobile or tablet. We suggest viewing tonight's program in speaker view, as I will be spotlighting our speakers this evening. From a computer, you can adjust this in the upper right-hand corner of the Zoom window by clicking view, but from a mobile or tablet, you should likely already be in speaker view, but you can swipe to change your views. We have enabled live transcription of the event. From a computer, you can turn this on by clicking Live Transcript, the CC icon, in the menu at the bottom of your screen and selecting Show Subtitle. From mobile or tablet, you can access these settings by clicking the three dots. Finally, you will notice that tonight's event is being recorded. Only the speakers' video feeds will be included in any publicly shared version of this event. And finally, I'd like to thank everyone for your generosity in creating beautiful community space of listening, storytelling, and being together this evening. I would also like to take a moment to acknowledge the unfolding situation in Ukraine and extend hopeful thoughts to all of those seeking safety, those in fear, and all of those navigating the unknown in the Ukraine and beyond. Without further ado, it is now my pleasure to introduce Darnell Hayes, who will introduce our esteemed guest this evening. Darnell Hayes is the Vice President of Operations of the YMCA of Central New York. Darnell has been with the Y for 14 years and currently lives in Syracuse, New York, with his wife LaShonda and three children, Dominic, Gianna, and DeMarco. Locally and nationally, Darnell is a graduate of YUSA's Multicultural Executive Development Institute, serves as the VP of the DeWitt Rotary Club and advisory board member for Big Brothers and Big Sisters, among other things, all while serving as a mentor to other young leaders looking to continue their journeys and careers in the YMCA. I am deeply grateful for Darnell's invitation to help organize tonight, and it is my pleasure to now turn the virtual stage over to him.
Thank you, Jess. Big shout out to you for emceeing and getting us organized and ready to talk with Ms. Michele. Before I share some of the amazingness that our speaker comes to us with, I want to share a quick thank you to her for her time with us tonight. I was introduced to Michele through her brother, Mark, a friend of mine that I've met locally. And I've had the privilege of getting to know her and learn about the legacy of Harriet Tubman that Michele carries on into her own life today. So a little bit about Michele. Michele Jones Galvin is a three-time great grandniece of Harriet Tubman. Miss Michele and her mother, Joyce Stokes Jones, co-authored Beyond the Underground, Aunt Harriet, Moses of Her People. As descendant biographers, they have penned in the creative nonfiction based on genealogical and historical research about Harriet Ross Tubman Davis, as we know her to be the greatest conductor of the Underground Railroad and celebrated Civil War general. The book that she'll talk about chronicles the family lineage from the survival of the Middle Passage to slavery on the Eastern Shore of Maryland to freedom in Canada before settling here in upstate New York. Now retired, Ms. Michele comes to us having specialized in human services program design, implementation, and evaluation. Her areas of expertise include coordination and collaboration of government and community initiatives, communications, and strategic planning. Ms. Michele is a certified Bridges Out of Poverty facilitator, a certified National Coalition Building Institute trainer. And with all those accolades, you can imagine service to others as a pillar in who she is as a leader, and serves on, in her other capacities, serves on the board of directors for the George and Rebecca Barnes Foundation, Focus Greater Syracuse, Guardian Angel Society, Loretto Corporate Management, League of Women Voters, and several other affiliations. A little bit more about Michele before I pass it on to her. In 2020, Michele Jones Galvin was the recipient of the NAACP Presidential Award and was also named co-chair of the 2020 New York State Centennial Suffrage Conference, serving with Kenneth Morris Jr., a descendant of Frederick Douglass, and Alice Kesey McCoy, a descendant of John Brown. As you can see with all of her accolades, Miss Michele is one that does the work, as we say, and it is my great pleasure and honor to introduce Miss Michele Jones Galvin.
Miss Michele, you are muted.
Looks like you're still muted, Michele. Let me.
Yeah. So as everyone has guessed, I'm having a little technical difficulty, but let me start again. Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. Aside from the technical difficulties, I do want to thank each and every one of you for being here. I also want to give a very special thank you to Darnell Hayes and Jessica Posner for the invitation for me to share this time with you. It is a pleasure and a privilege to be here this evening. And my goal is to educate and elevate your awareness about the lifetimes and accomplishments of Harriet Tubman. Hopefully, you will walk away knowing something more about her that you may not have known before. So tonight, we have an opportunity to intentionally celebrate Black History Month by recognizing the contributions and achievements of Harriet Tubman, greatest conductor of the Underground Railroad. It is also an opportunity to showcase Harriet Tubman, the Moses of her people, who escaped from slavery, then returned to the South to rescue her family and scores of other freedom seekers. And likewise, it is an opportunity for us to be mindful of who she was. Harriet Tubman was an abolitionist, humanitarian, Civil War veteran, and avid champion for equal rights and voting rights for African Americans. In short, she was a social justice advocate. Black lives mattered then, like Black lives matter now. So when we dig a little deeper, we find the woman behind, excuse me, when we dig a little deeper, we find the woman behind the icon. Harriet Tubman was an ordinary woman who did extraordinary things. Now, how is it that she accomplished these extraordinary things? The woman behind the historical figure was endowed with notable qualities. She is defined by her self-sacrifice, her compassion, service to others, her courage, and her trustworthiness. She is further defined by her values and commitment to faith, family, fortitude, and freedom. So yes, I am proud to share that I am a great, great, great grandniece of Harriet Ross Tubman. In fact, my 3 times great grandmother was Sophia Ross Brown, Harriet's sister. Now I know that that's a mouthful, but I am so proud to share with you my biological tie to Aunt Harriet, Moses of her people. As a descendant, author, and biographer, one of my greatest accomplishments has been working with my mother, Joyce Stokes Jones, to research and write about Harriet Tubman's life, times, achievements, and challenges. Together, we co-authored Beyond the Underground, Aunt Harriet, Moses of her people. The writing of this book began with my mother's passion to find her biological connection to the greatest conductor of the Underground Railroad. Researching your own family history is quite fascinating. As my mother says, everyone has a story worth knowing. We certainly found Harriet Tubman, the historic icon, but we also found Aunt Harriet, the woman. Aunt Harriet was a loving person, but was rejected by the love of her life. She feared no man or woman, but was in awe of and obedient to her maker. She was brilliant, but unable to read and write. She owned property, but was not allowed to vote. She was compassionate, but she did not take kindly to foolishness. She was humble, yet audacious at the same time. And at the end of the day, Harriet Tubman believed we are all human beings, deserving of human rights, civil rights, women's rights, and voting rights. You know, a professor of mine once said that African people believe as long as one is remembered, his or her spirit lives. And in our family, the spirit of Harriet Tubman lives. Harriet Tubman lived a storied life. Most people know of her work on the Underground Railroad, but few know of her work in the Civil War. She was a patriot extraordinaire. They called her General Tubman. She led 3 steamboat attacks on the Confederates. Because of the intelligence that she gained from the slaves along the Combahee River, the Union Army obliterated rice plantations and seized and destroyed Confederate supplies and property. Tonight, I have selected an excerpt from Beyond the Underground, Aunt Harriet, Moses of her people, to share with you. It is titled, A Call to Arms. It describes President Abraham Lincoln's decision to enlist Negro slaves into the Union Army. It depicts the day Harriet learned she was being called into service for the Department of the South. It reveals what she found in Hilton Head, South Carolina. The war between the states, more commonly known as the American Civil War, was at best a war of contradictions. Just before dawn on April 12, 1861, Confederate forces opened fire on Fort Sumter, South Carolina. The people of the United States were thrust into a conflict of enormous proportions. It all seemed so reminiscent of the fervor during the Revolutionary War. Then, Americans were facing off with Britain to preserve life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, in a flourishing 19th century America, Americans faced off against each other for these same values. Conflicting political and philosophical views spiraled into an explosive confrontation. The war began. Everyone had a life and death stake in the war. They were driven to protect and preserve life as they knew it or life as they wished it to be. The slave economy was at the core of the debate between those who supported it and those who opposed it. Americans were forced to take sides in a political battle that divided the North from the South and the Republicans from the Democrats, free state proponents from slave state protectionists, whites from enslaved Negroes, and abolitionists from slave owners. The decisiveness had been long brewing, but came to a head with the election of Abraham Lincoln as President of the United States. His ascension to the presidency was deeply troubling to Southern Democrats. Lincoln and his fellow Republicans espoused anti-slavery and supported legislation to restrict slavery in Southern states and opposed its expansion to the Western territories. Southern Democrats wanted to support South Carolina and other states to secede or withdraw from the Union. These states combined their forces to create the Confederate States of America under the leadership of their president, Jefferson Davis. Unbelievably, the two Americas were at war. The battle raged on, with the Union and the Confederates claiming victory at strategic fronts and ports. The armies on both sides suffered tremendous losses. Thousands of soldiers, clad in either blue or gray, could not escape the ferocious gunfire of the enemy. So both Lincoln and Davis had to reckon with the reality that their military forces were significantly reduced due to death, illness, and defection. Lincoln reluctantly decided to bolster his forces by organizing and utilizing colored troops. The colored regiments were proud and fought hard to preserve the Union. They believed that a victory for the Union was a victory for liberty. Former slaves and free Negroes volunteered for the Union Army to help abolish slavery and create an America where they would finally be free from bondage. The troops also suffered numerous losses of life and limb, but they fought equally for the cause. Abraham Lincoln did not regret his decision to enlist the help of enslaved Negroes to join the Union Army. Well into the second year of the Civil War, William H. Seward, Secretary of State, convinced President Lincoln to call upon Harriet Tubman from his hometown of Auburn, New York, to join the Union forces as a spy, scout, and nurse. He didn't make this recommendation lightly. Seward was well aware of Harriet's exploits as an abolitionist. She had rescued scores of slaves from bondage. She had successfully secreted these slaves from the eastern shore of Maryland through Pennsylvania, all the way to Canada. Her confidence, fearlessness, and courage made her an excellent candidate to assist the Union in its efforts to free slaves and recruit them. He was introduced to Harriet years before by his very good friend, Frederick Douglass. In fact, Seward and his wife Frances assisted Harriet during her slave rescues by harboring the fugitives in their downstairs kitchen and the dormitory above the outdoor woodshed. In 1862, the Lincoln administration, by way of Governor James Andrew of Massachusetts, would send word to Harriet Tubman in Auburn, New York, of their desire to have her join the War Department of the South. Harriet's life would take an interesting turn into a different kind of battle. A military battle was taking place in the South. The Union Army and the Negroes in South Carolina were calling for her one-of-a-kind skill and determination to fight for freedom. Harriet was awakened by the crowing of the roosters and cackling chickens housed in the coops at 180 South Street Road on the Auburn-Fleming line. The year was 1862. She awoke every morning knowing she was blessed to have a home that she owned. A few years prior, her good friend, Senator William Seward, sold her the property. She could walk out to her yard on 7 acres of land that she owned and gazed upon the geese that bantered about, squawking and dipping their beaks into the dark earth. She also loved to smell the blossoms and the fruit hanging delicately from the many apple and peach trees. And of course, the chickens strutted lazily around the grounds or sat in the barn laying large brown eggs. God was good. Her land was good. Her home was good. Harriet lived with her aging parents, her brothers, and several other boarders. Rit, her mother, suffering from the usual ailments of people her age, didn't miss a beat making breakfast for her husband, adult children, and the others most mornings. Rit was up before the roosters this morning, making fixins for biscuits, salt pork, and hominy for the hungry brood. She didn't mind having to wake early. She savored the freedom to awake when she chose to. At her age, being able to cook for her family and the boarders was a pleasant chore. Harriet arose from a welcomed sleep. She washed and dressed before joining her parents in the kitchen. As she descended a steep flight of stairs to the lower level, her nostrils were filled with the aroma of her favorite breakfast food. The smell wafted throughout the house. "Morning, Mama. Morning, Daddy." "Morning to you too," Rit and Ben said in unison. "Sure smells good, Mama," Harriet said as she sat herself on one of the ladder-back chairs. "We say that every morning, don't we?" chuckled Ben. And he and Harriet shared a morning giggle. Rit ignored them, but appreciated their liking of her cooking. She loved cooking for her family. "You going to the Pomeroy's today, Daddy?" Harriet mumbled between bites of her buttered biscuit. "Yes, I goes there today. If there be enough time, it goes to the Fitches too. They both needs work done in the gardens. Where you going today?" Harriet replied in her usual straightforward tone. "This morning I goes to the Seward mansion. Not early though. Miss Frances don't need me till late morning. She's going to the orphanage to visit the children." Ben and Rit and Harriet said a prayer of thanksgiving before heartily eating of the food that was set before them. All that could be heard were lip smacking and finger licking. The gloss of sweet butter glistened on their dark, full lips. Finishing up their meal, they sat quietly for a few minutes, thinking about the chores that lay ahead of them. Overhead, they heard creaking of the floorboards as the others wrestled about, getting ready for the day. Harriet's brothers and other boarders descended upon them and took their places at the old yet sturdy pine table. Grit and Ben had pushed away from the table and made their way for the others to be fed. Grit moved slowly to the stove, returning with a pot of hominy to fill their bowls. Morning voices rose and fell into a loud, muffled pitch. One voice could not be distinguished from the others. A loud rap on the front door caused everyone to become silent. The rapping grew into pounding. Someone out there was determined to get their attention. Swiftly, Harriet made her way to the door. Before opening it, she called out to the person on the other side. "Who's there?" "I have a letter here. It's a government letter addressed to Mrs. Harriet Tubman." Harriet felt the heaviness of the door while she jostled it, twisting and turning the brass knob. It finally opened towards her, and she could see a rather official-looking man standing on the stoop. In his hand, he held a large greenish-brown envelope. Without hesitation, the slight gentleman spoke in a clear voice. "Are you Harriet Tubman?" Harriet deliberately made eye contact with the white man and said, "Yes, sir, I's Harriet Tubman." The man handed her the envelope, then asked her to sign her name on another piece of paper. With a sense of pride, Harriet lifted the pen given to her and placed her X upon it. The man looked at her and then looked at her mark. Without so much as a thank you, he turned on his heel and left the premises. Harriet watched as he climbed upon his wagon. With one jolt of the reins, the horses sped away. Harriet quietly closed the door. She held the envelope tightly in her hand. Looking down at the telltale dark spots, she knew the marks were words. She also knew that another person would have to tell her what the spots meant. She, like most former slaves, were forbidden to learn how to read and write. Ain't that something to reckon, she thought. What a shame she couldn't read her own letters, especially one as important as this one. When Harriet returned to the kitchen, she told the others about the letter. They wondered why she would receive a letter from the government. She thought long and hard about it too. So she set out for that long trek from 180 South Street Road north to the Seward Mansion at 33 South Street. Along the way, she admired the huge expanse of farmland. She loved being able to walk freely wherever she chose. Freedom was never far from her mind. And so today, she was not in a hurry. She took the time to appreciate the scenery. She saw dozens of dairy cows mooing and chomping at the low grasses. Horses galloped playfully in the fields. The chickens and geese roamed freely around their owners' properties. Being close to the land was all she knew. Suddenly, her thoughts were flooded with memories of the Brodus plantation in Maryland. Oh, how different it was here. Negroes owned their own property, and she was one of them. God was good. She lowered her head in complete gratitude, and she continued her stroll down South Street. She had often done small jobs for many of the families there, the Hislops, the Osborns, Emersons, Pomeroys, and the Swifts treated her kindly and paid her well, knowing that she used her money to support her family and to finance her freedom ventures. After reaching the Seward home, Harriet walked along the path leading to the side entry. Frances Seward seeing the small Black woman approaching, opened the door. She greeted Harriet in her usual friendly manner. Before Harriet could speak, Frances rattled off a litany of things that had to be tidied up or cleaned. As she spoke, she was walking through the hallway toward the main living room. Harriet's mind was not on cleaning. She would do that later. Right now, she wanted to know what the letter had to say. She pulled the folded envelope out of the pocket of her full-length skirt. She politely waited for Mrs. Seward to finish speaking. Harriet spoke and said, "Miss Frances, can you read me this letter? It comes today." The man said it was a government letter. Frances turned slowly as if she was awestruck. She carefully took the letter from Harriet's roughened hands. She glanced at the front and the back of the envelope as if to discern its context without opening it. Frances finally spoke in almost a whisper and said, "Harriet, this letter is from the governor of Massachusetts. That is Governor John A. Andrew. It says that he is requesting your assistance in the Department of the South to work in military actions against the Confederate States. He goes on to say that you are needed in South Carolina. You will report to General David Hunter. They expect your arrival in a few weeks." Harriet was visibly bowled over. Almost at a loss for words, she inquired, "Miss Frances, is that letter telling me to help the Union in this here Civil War?" Frances was taken aback as well and answered thoughtfully, "Yes, it's clear that that is exactly what's being asked of you, Harriet." Both women looked at each other in wonderment. They each knew what the other was thinking. This would be Harriet's most heroic and courageous undertaking. Frances motioned for Harriet to follow her to the kitchen at the rear of the home. Each took a seat at the small round table. While they sat, Frances discussed with Harriet the news she had recently heard from her husband, William Seward. "You know, Harriet, William has written me of late. He said that President Lincoln has decided to allow Negro troops to join the Union forces in the war against the Confederates. Well, we've all been wondering what took him so long. Now, I will be down there right along with them," Harriet declared. "The Union forces need you, Harriet. They know of your stamina, your determination, and the skills you developed conducting their rescue. Now you can use them to help save the Union." Harriet boasted, "I know how to get slaves from one place to the other, and I never lost one yet. And if need be, I will use my gun." "So, it sounds like you've made up your mind to go south again." "Yep, nothing and nobody can stop me now. With the Lord's help, I will see the glory of victory. My people will be free." Harriet arrived at Hilton Head, South Carolina, ready for the rigors of war. Thank you so much for having me this evening.
Thank you, Miss Michele. Every time I talk with you, I find out more information that I didn't know or that I need to learn about. So I appreciate you. I do have a couple of questions that will help kind of maybe facilitate more discussion and more learning for us as a group. And of course, to the folks that are on the call with us, if you've got questions, please feel free to throw them in the chat. We'll make sure to be able to ask Ms. Michele those questions as well. Well, so first of all, again, thank you for your presence in that reading, Michele. For those looking for information or to learn more about the book, Harriet's leadership during the Civil War, and kind of the general life of Harriet Tubman, what are some tools or resources that you would recommend us looking for to find that information?
Well, first of all, I would like to just say that we've covered a lot of that and Beyond the Underground on Harriet, Moses of Her People. So we would be looking for people to look for the opportunity to look at our website, which is called mosesofherpeople.com. And you will find an area there where you will be able to purchase the book. But what I also suggest is that people really take the opportunity, not only in Black History Month, but throughout the year, and particularly our educators and people of color who really need to begin to reacquaint and or acquaint for the first time our young folks about our history. The African American experience in America has been not only over 450 years, but it includes so much history about how we lived, why we were slaves, how we were rescued or not rescued, what we did and how we lived as enslaved people. So yes, take an opportunity to certainly pick up a copy of Beyond the Underground at Harriet Moses of Her People, but also let's get really acquainted with the African American experience in this country.
Indeed. So we just added the link to the site recommended there for folks to access. So thank you for that, Jess. And you know, that to your point, Michelle, that it's that book and just in general education and educating ourselves, our communities, our peers on all things, right? All things historical, especially focused around, in this context, around our Black history and what folks have and continue to go through. So another question for you, and I only have a few because I want to give people the floor as well. When you and I spoke, Michelle, you informed me on so much about Harriet Tubman and beyond the Underground Railroad. Can you tell us a little bit more about her work beyond what the world kind of has known or learned about Harriet?
Yes, I'd like to do that because so many people really look at Harriet through the lens of the Underground Railroad, but her life was so much more. She did beautiful things there, extraordinary things there. But again, as we just spoke about, she was a patriot extraordinaire, and she did wonderful work in the Civil War as well, which many folks don't really know about. But in addition to that, her life was always about service to others, in particular, African Americans, particularly when it came to family. And so what most people don't realize is that she was one of the founders of the National Association of Colored Women. And that particular organization still exists today in Washington. But it was there that she and other African American suffragists, I said the word African American women suffragists, who were fighting diligently for the writing votes, not only for African American women, but for African American men. So people really are not acquainted with that, but if they Google the work that they do there, they know that the women today are still doing what they were doing back then, which was to ensure that Black families were educated, employed. They worked very steadily against anti-lynching back at that time, and voting rights was extremely important. The other piece of work that Aunt Harriet did later in her life was she established the John Brown Home for the Aged and Indigent Colored People in Auburn, New York. And it was a wonderful place where people who were poor or down on their luck or just very, very ill and had no one to take care of them could go to the John Brown Home for the Aged. And why that was so important is because there were so many people at that time, and I think it opened around 1908. that really needed help in healthcare and in the final days of dying. In fact, Aunt Harriet herself was infirmed there about a year before she passed away. So when you think about Aunt Harriet, you think most about service to others, service on the Underground Railroad, serving those freedom seekers, service in the Civil War, helping the soldiers to stay well, and also using those intelligence operations so that all Black people could be free. Using her service to others to help found the National Association of Colored Women's Clubs. And finally, in her final years, to create and found the John Brown Home for the Aged.
Amazing. I want to sit there a little bit, stay in the frame of service to others. As we read your biography and as I shared some of the points, service to others seems to be a space that is important to you, right? Is in the alignment with the work that we do as a Y is there, right? So can you, obviously this isn't just about sharing the history, but also for you as a living descendant is to continuing that legacy of serving and service to others. Can you talk about your experience and in your role too, of as you carry along the legacy and the history? Can you talk about your experience in stories and as you carry that legacy of Aunt Harriet?
Yes. I'll start with my volunteer work because to me that embodies so much of what Aunt Harriet was about, which is service to others. And I probably have served on the board of directors of, who knows now, probably over 25 different nonprofit organizations in the area over the last 25 years. And the reason why I feel that's important for me is that it kind of helps me to connect with Aunt Harriet in terms of understanding those who are around us that are much more vulnerable. They are vulnerable folks because they don't have health care, or they are elderly and in need of services, or they're young children and mothers who require access to prenatal care and pediatric care. So, when I look at the scope of my work as a volunteer, as a member of the board of directors, it really is to make sure that particularly in Syracuse, which is a services-rich area, that the proper services and the right services are allocated and given to those who are not only most vulnerable, but eligible for those services. And oftentimes, many of our folks don't even know that they're eligible for a lot of the services that are available. So outreach, education, and those kinds of things are very important. And I like to make sure that I cue into the programs of these nonprofits to make sure that their strategic planning, their outreach, and their service provision is done equally and fairly across the board, particularly with our families of color.
You sound like you want to be you want the Y to be a 27, 26.
Oh,
that's what it sounds like. That's what it sounds like to me.
I'll take it.
Hey, listen, we have your number. We'll find you. The last question I have for you before you jump into the chat, Michele, is just it's a what if question, right? If Aunt Harriet were here today, how do you think she would be leading, and and what message do you think she would want to leave us with?
Well, let me start with the first part of your question. If she were here today, what do I think she would be doing? If Aunt Harriet were here today, I can just tell you, I know it in my heart. She would be standing on the front line, hand in hand, arm in arm with Black Lives Matters members and promoters. Black lives mattered then, and Black Lives Matter Now.
Yeah.
I think she would be particularly alarmed at the mass incarceration of men of color in this country. And I'm sure if she could find a way to unlock those prison doors and get them out of it, the same way she rescued the slaves that were harbored below the Mason-Dixon line, she would be there to do it. She would also be very disappointed, I think, in the state of education for our young people. The differences in resources, the difference in of the teachers that are available, to actually work in our schools, new programming around self-esteem and self-care and self-help and actually they have this very wonderful programming called trauma-informed care.
Yeah.
We learn how to deal with our young folks and our families through the traumas that they live through on a day-to-day basis. And we help them to get around those traumas and to begin to live a life of quality and a life of, self-esteem, and one that allows them to have the potential that they were born with, to nourish that potential. And that's what I think she would be very, very concerned about. And then just one of the other things that just absolutely sounds like she would be involved in it would be the human trafficking. Human trafficking of young people, of young boys and young girls, using them as sex objects and actually as slaves, really, in many instances across the world. So those are the areas that I think she would really have something to say about and want to be involved in.
Yeah, it's unfortunate to hear and to know that some of the things that she was working on way back then are still things, education, right? Equity, those are those things that we're doing what we can to ensure that there is across the board. And I hear you loud and clear on the potential disappointment that she would have, but also the things that she would be leaning into and leading along with us. So thank you for giving me some time, giving us some time. I do want to open up for folks. If you have questions, there's a opportunity to kind of ask Michele, questions about herself and or about the history of her family lineage here today while we have the remaining 7 minutes or so. We've got a question from our very own Jess.
Okay, Jessica.
So Michele, what advice would you offer young people in the struggle today?
I've been thinking about that, and I think my answer would be, especially for our young ones, that they have to connect with the gift that they've been given. I mean, so oftentimes kids have this thing where they want to be like the other kids. Well, that's okay. But I think they really need to find out personally what their own gifts are, whether it's music, whether it's athletics, whether it's STEAM, science, technology, engineering, math, art. They have to find their gift because that's what they have to give to the world. And if they don't find the gift, then I'm sorry that they're going to probably languish a little bit, because all of us have purpose. All of us have been given a gift. And if we can find that gift and share it with the world, that really is a true form of service to others.
Very well, and good question, Jess. Thank you for getting the conversation started. I see a hand up. Jess, I might ask you to help me navigate the questions and hands because my screen is not cooperating. Looks like Kimberly has her hand up. Kim, you can go ahead and share.
Hi, Michelle. Thank you for coming and speaking with us. I have a question. I'm clearly Southern. I'm from North Carolina. I am also a minority woman. I'm from the Lumbee tribe of North Carolina. And I have a question. I was a former teacher for like 10 years, and I used Harriet Tubman to introduce the notion of, slavery to my younger students. Do you have any like suggestions on how to have this conversation with really young kids who because my students were like, why did they do that? So it was a very hard conversation because kids know right from wrong when adults don't. So do you have any like tips or suggestions on how to have this very difficult conversation with younger kids?
Well, I think the first thing is not to talk down to them, but you want to make sure that they understand the concepts in a simple way that they can make sense of it. So I wouldn't, I guess that's what I'm saying. As a teacher and as an educator, many of my sorority sisters are educators, and it's very important that I think we speak to the children in a way that they can understand what slavery meant, basically, and that the slaves were working very hard, but they didn't receive any money. And this happened over a long period of time. Just something that they can connect with, understand basically what happened, and as they get older and older, reframe it in language that is a little more stronger, a little more clear. So by the time they get to high school, they have a pretty good darn sense of what actually happened with the African American experience and also the Native American experience. I mean, hey, why not we just open it up so everybody can talk about the experiences they've had vis-a-vis American history.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Is there an answer?
I'm muted. There we go. Thank you, Kim, for your question, and others for joining in. We do have a few minutes remaining, and I want to respect folks' time. So if you're willing to be patient with us for the other couple of questions, please do so. Michelle, I'm making the assumption, but are you willing to continue to get through these couple of questions here?
Oh my gosh, yes.
Perfect. Okay. I'll start with the, it looks like Lori asked a question a little bit ago. The direct message to me was around family photos and any preservation of them or exhibits that we could go and see.
Well, it depends. Two places come to mind in particular, and one is the Harriet Tubman home in Auburn, New York. Anybody that has the opportunity to get there, they will be introduced to not only Anne Harriet's story, but a number of photos and I wouldn't say artifacts, but photos of her lifetimes and accomplishments. Artifacts, however, the only place that I know where there is a collection of actual Harriet Tubman artifacts is at the Smithsonian National Museum of African American Art and Culture. People would be amazed at what that looks like. And what that really brings up for me, for the person who asked the question, is that what I have found, my sister has found in her research, and my mom certainly, is that really African American families, especially when you try to go back in time, photographs in particular are so hard to get a handle on. Many of our families didn't have the money to take photographs. That was the least of their worries. They were worried about day-to-day survival. So we now have an opportunity to see what Aunt Harriet looked like. But what we grapple with is not even knowing what my father's father looked like, what certain other relatives look like, because there are literally no pictures. So I say all of that to say that there are things that you can do. You can visit, the Harriet Tubman home in Auburn. You can get to the museum in Washington, but also just look for African-American museums and places that collect collectibles, and you should find them from city to city around the country, actually.
Very well. I'll keep moving just for the get folks in. Danielle Horn asks, are there any goals that you wish to accomplish or encourage others to complete?
Just in general, or related to Aunt Harriet, or?
I would interpreting, and Danielle, you can, I don't want to speak for you. You can come off mute, but I would assume that it's around Aunt Harriet in general in education.
Okay, let's see, any goals? Well, when it comes to Aunt Harriet, you know, I could talk about her forever. But as far as her inspiration to me personally, all I can say is that my sister and I and my mother own two women-owned businesses related to Aunt Harriet. And what we would like to do is to offer a range of merchandise that will inspire others to be inspired by Aunt Harriet. And then the other business, of course, is the one that is related to book sales and my own public speaking that I do on occasion. But as far as anything else, I can't really foresee anything other goal related at this point.
Right. And I have one more from KT. KT asks, are there any plans? Do you have any plans of writing another biography around Aunt Harriet? She asked because she teaches students who are lower level readers and always looking for opportunities to kind of help people kind of not repeat that history and learn from leaders like Harriet Tubman.
Yeah. Well, I don't have any immediate plans to write on Harriet Tubman any further. I think I've exhausted my ability to communicate that way. But there may be something coming out by my sister, who's also done a lot of research on Aunt Harriet in the family. And, you know, we may be looking for something from her soon, but I certainly don't have any plans to do any more writing.
Very well. We certainly appreciate you. We appreciate your time, Ms. Michele. If there are more resources, feel free to share. I know this group and others will be interested in looking at them. If nothing else, we are we want to be resources to community too. So we'll happily share them. And so you know how to reach us. We know how to reach you as well. If do you have anything that you want to leave us with before we transition into our evenings?
Yes, I think what I want to say is that, you know, when we look at Aunt Harriet, we are intrigued by her, we are inspired by her, and I can't say enough about service to others. I think that she would be asking us to look in our own lives, to look at our families, to look at our communities, to look at our nation as a whole, and where we feel that we can be of service, where we feel we can speak out, stand up, lean into issues around us, that she would encourage us to get engaged. And I think she would be saying to us something like, don't talk to me about it. Do something about it. Yes.
I feel that 1000%. Jess, I will ask if you have any. I know you are supporting me and helping navigate this virtual world. Do you have anything you want to leave us with before we take off?
Just my deep gratitude. Thank you so much, Ms. Michele.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night. Thank you, Michele.
Bye-bye, everybody. Okay, good night.